recording in progress. All right, well, happy Friday. It's been a month, literally. Welcome to the February 18th MVP Office Hours. I am Dale Ziegler, and along with me as usual, my partners in crime, Squire Kirshner and Joy Shutters-Helbing. Say hello, friends.
Hello, friends.
They take orders well.
Again, follow.
As always, we have our static links up there in the upper right. You all can see my screen, right?
Sure can.
Okay, I've made that mistake before, and it was awkward when I got 3 slides in and people called me out. We can't see your screen. I'm like, oh crap. And then I muted myself. It was a big thing. Anyway, our static links up there. You can follow MVP Office Hours on Twitter, as well as each of our individual handles, and mvpofficehours.info as the main site for registration information and all those things. You can email us at our Gmail, but we strongly encourage making your way over to the Success Community group shown down there in the lower right of the slide, so that if you have a specific question that you need answered, open it up to the group. There's only 3 of us that access that email box. There's several hundred, if not over 1,000, that can get into that group and possibly help you out. We do meet the first and third Friday of every month. Normally, this is not a normal month. We skipped 2 weeks ago because of the admin release readiness call, but normally we are first and third Friday, and we are happy to have you all here. So as we mentioned, normally we're first and third Friday of the month. So our next call will be in 2 weeks on March 4th. You can go to that bit.ly to register for the next handful of calls, actually. You can also catch past recordings on our YouTube channel, as well as posts within the community and on Twitter. And please use our favorite hashtags. If you've never been to an MVP Office Hours call before, well, welcome. We love having anybody and everybody. Welcome to all current and future MVPs, because all of you could be an MVP. Your MVPs in our heart. You could be in the eyes of Salesforce as well in the future. We love having everyone participate. This is not the you ask a question and only MVP answers call. This is for everyone. Answer it. You can ask follow-ups. You can give your, if you've solved the problem before, how did you solve it? Anything. We just ask that to ask a question, you can either raise your hand in the chat or post the question in the chat, or if you hear dead air, just unmute and say, hey, I have a question. You can share your screen. That does make a lot of the problem solving a lot easier, but please, please, please make your production orgs your last possible resort, or just don't do it at all. We are recording this. We will be posting this to YouTube later, which, side comment, if you if you're uncomfortable or not able to be recorded, please jump off and we'll share the recording sometime this weekend along with the deck. But the last thing you want is your production information or a client's information recorded to the internet for forever and ever and ever, because there is no delete key on the internet. You can also use the chat to share links and other resources that we will add to the deck when we share it out later. And just normal Zoom conference call protocol, mute yourself when you're not speaking. We also ask that if you can just give us your real name as your participant name. Between office hours and some user groups that each of us have led, we've had some interesting names show up because the kids hijacked the Zoom accounts, which we get it, it happens. This is a professional networking call. We just want to know who it is that we're actually talking to. So if you can please just update your name to your name, that would be super duper fantastic. Community events. So it's great that we're seeing Dreamin' events get back on the calendars, and a lot of them in person. It's going to be a couple of months before the next one. I think, was this the same weekend? Yeah, these dates might still be in flux for Northeast Dreamin' and Texas Dreamin', because they do coincide with Trailblazer DX, but I think we're still trying to get details on those. And then if you want to pop over to Europe for Czech Dreamin' in May, that'll be going on May 27th. Salesforce events, there is a world tour special that I've been seeing ads for coming up on March 8th. And again, if you want to hop over to Europe, World Tour Paris on March 30th. Joy, Squire, and I all lead local user groups. If you haven't gotten connected with those, I'm in Kansas City, Squire's in Milwaukee, Joy is in Chicago. But you can join our groups, you can join your local groups, you can join any of them. A lot of them are still virtual. Some of them are going in person, but they're great ways to connect with fellow Salesforcians in your local market so that you don't feel like it's just you. Salesforce continues to grow and grow and grow. And so user groups are a great way for people in the same local area to get together and idea share and meet each other and everything. So definitely check those out. Our Resource Hall of Fame, I can guarantee at least one of these links will be brought up during today's call. Ones that you should just bookmark for yourself is the order of execution, the data access model, and then Salesforce object key prefixes. Those are ones that a lot of admins and developers alike end up going to. And then the golden circle and Mandela effect, those are just fun ones that always manage to rear their ugly head, or pretty head, as it were. So with that, we actually, because it's been 4 weeks, we had a number of posts in the success group, but I think a lot of those ended up getting answered, which is great. That's what the group is there for, is to hopefully keep people moving forward in between calls. But one that we put in here is from Joanne, who I see on the call here. Joanne, you want to unmute and give us a little bit more color on this?
Sure. We are actually moving to a different org, so we purchased it a year in advance, and we basically want to keep the same configuration. And I'm in the process of cleaning up the data, so customer data would come later. But just, is there a fast, easy way of copying non-customer data, but the rest of the structure over to another org? And I had done a little bit of reading about the Ant migration tool, but I've never used it. I did have it loaded on my laptop. I'm looking for a shortcut, basically, or any resources, any tips anybody has. I'm all about working smarter, not harder. So anything you have, I would welcome.
So whether it's Ant or if it's SFDX and VS Code or whatever, it all uses the same XML packaging,
Yes.
Which for the most part could be transferable. There may be some nuances along the way if there's different field references or dependencies on each other to make you stagger the order. One thing that before I really got into VS Code is Workbench actually allows you to upload packages of those. All you have to do is take those XML files, have a manifest file, so that'd be the package.xml, to list out what the things are that you're trying to deploy. And then Workbench has a package upload capability on it.
Okay.
That's the very high level, easy answer to it. Obviously, you need to get your hands dirty with it, which
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to take time offline, or if we don't have questions later in the call, we can start to walk through it. But
and just
Workbench
one
is
other
easy to
question,
do.
and then I'll give the floor to someone else. So if you were doing that, would you try and break it into a couple of pieces as opposed to packaging everything up into one humongous? I'm assuming the answer is yes, but
It's kind of like the order of execution. You have to know what's going to try and happen when. If you try to slam it all into one big package, you may be trying to deploy something that's dependent on another thing that may be in your package, but that dependency hasn't been processed yet. So it may error out because it tried to put paint on a wall that you haven't propped the wall up yet.
okay.
So
Okay.
And
Do you
humongous
think
is relative.
I'm sorry?
And humongous is relative. So,
Yeah.
yeah. I think I think what Dale's driving at is, like, there is no easy way, but there's like if you have a planful plan, it should kind of write itself once you know, like, my end goal is 7,000 lines of metadata, and here's my blocks. It'll start to resolve itself if you just work through it. There's no easy way though.
Okay.
Wait, Stuart, what?
I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'll tell you what I did that failed. I know in the write up here it says we're going to copy our org minus customer data. Once I tried to do that and realized that in my metadata I had references directly to the data. So what you might want to do is, plan it all out on paper and then think about what in my declarative or non-declarative code do I reference specific IDs or specific names of things that might fail when I move it from A to B, because that's not the name of it in B. It's now the domain is something else, or the name of that thing is now not chocolate, it's vanilla. So I've done that. Yep. So really think about it's not just your metadata. Your metadata and data are kind of symbiotic in Salesforce.
Yes, and that's a great suggestion. I appreciate you sharing it. My thought was, we're really not going to roll for a while. So I have some time, a good 6 months or more, and I'm in the process of cleaning, merging files and removing duplicates and updating records. So it would be my preference not to move the customer data. I would rather work on cleaning it up and bring over the cleanest version possible. But you raise a really great point, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Hard-coded record type IDs. Wow.
Never heard of it.
No, it's painful.
Now, one thing that, like the Eclipse IDE, rest in peace. And I'm sure the other tools do. I just haven't played with it. You could try to slam everything in, and it'll stop at the first error that it comes up with. And it would, like, if you had all the time in the world, you could go try to resolve that error, re-push it in, let it get to the next error, and you just kind of like iterate your way through it. That's not the smartest way to do it, again, unless you have all the time in the world, but it's but I mean, things to think about are, again, what's dependent on what? You can't have custom fields without an object to put them in. So is your first load like the objects? No matter what object, like when you have the XML for an object, it's going to identify, is the name field a text field or an auto number? If it's an auto number, how's the auto number named? Like all those kinds of things, and name fields, and if there's record type, like all those kinds of things that automatically get spun up when you spin up an object are going to happen during that deployment. If you can break it up into manageable chunks like those to say, all right, did all my objects go? Super, awesome. Now let's go to the fields, because there's very minimal risk that when I know what object the field is on, those should go. It doesn't take long to really run through those. It's when you start getting into the interwoven intricacies of things that's what prolongs the attempted deployment process. So just have a game plan of, I'll do this, and then I'll do this, and I'll do this, and I'll do this.
Yeah.
And
I think I like that, Dale, because if you bucket everything up by almost like you're building a house, right? I don't want to put in my automation before I've got my objects. I don't want to put in my page layouts until I have fields. So if you even look at the metadata file in that way and kind of walk through each kind of chunk of each layer of that cake, you'll probably have fewer errors and you'll know where to work.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a crazy thought.
Uh-oh.
And I'm from Chicago, so maybe that's just part of my thought process. Wouldn't it be, isn't it kind of like you're taking a backup of your production, making a sandbox, and then making that sandbox a live org, right? Isn't that kind of what you're doing? Kind of? And is that possible? Can you make a sandbox a production environment?
Well, I don't know. That's a question for the group. I mean, we have two separate organizations currently assigned. So, I mean, clearly I could create a backup sandbox of our current org, but then it's getting it from our current org. It's like a whole other org. You know what I mean?
Joanne, are you assimilating two orgs into a new org?
I'm actually assimilating one org into another org. I'm
So
basically
two will
taking
become
what we
one.
have. It's a different version. It's a different edition of Salesforce is what it is.
So you are going to a new, more expensive version or not so much?
A less expensive version.
Oh,
right.
so from
So
what?
that's
to
a
what?
really big thing.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
we needed to understand, because there are things that you are able to do now that you won't be able to do going forward. And that's why they can't downgrade your org.
Yeah, and most of the functionality, so we're moving to, I believe, Enterprise, and we're on a old version that's no longer around, but it's comparable to performance. But when you compare the two editions, the additional functionality that you pick up with the higher org are not things that we're currently using or
Okay.
could easily be disabled. So that's part of the reason we're moving in that direction, besides the obvious reason. From that perspective, that would obviously be a huge issue for people who are using something today and wouldn't be able to use it tomorrow. That's not really an issue for us in this transition. It's a great point. It just,
But
So
so just make sure though, your destination is enterprise.
mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I grimaced too, because even though there's features you're not using, some of those things are baked into things you're trying to deploy, even if you don't realize it. So it really makes me nervous.
So my other thought is, I mean, I could just do it old school and build it object by object, automation by automation. I mean, I have a reference point, right? So I guess, what does the group think? In the end, which is the better way to go?
I think,
Building it from the ground up, I think, would be more.
well, yeah, it's going to be interesting if you're trying to merge, because have you already done the analysis of what's in both, like from an object and a field perspective? Let's start with that, because really nothing else exists without your actual data model.
Right.
Have you at least gone through that to know what needs to come into the destination org?
I mean, pretty much, the vast majority.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, we're going to bring over all of our standard objects and all of our custom objects. Some of the functionality, like they're not using territory management, even though I've proposed it. So like, I don't have to, you know what I mean? It just.
Right.
So I guess the question for the group is, since we're going to a lesser version, is it really better for me to just build it object by object, add the fields, add the and just, it might be the safer way.
I think it all depends on how comfortable you are with the tool, right? Because if you try to do this with a tool that you're not familiar with, you are going to continue to run into like errors, right? That are going to be learning errors that you're going to learn about as you go. And as you get closer to the end, you're going to get much better at it. However, you have to decide how you want to spend your brain power and your time. Is it like, am I going to try to like approach this project and bang my head against the wall, like at every turn, for like the first half of it, or am I going to build this and maybe improve upon this as we go? Right? You're like, oh, well, look at all those pick list values we don't use anymore. Not going to bring those over. Or, oh, look, a multi-pick list that we don't need.
Yeah, it clearly would be a cleaner implementation in the new org, because when you're rebuilding everything, you build it right.
Right.
Okay.
And there's if you go that way, you could also do like, what is it? The spreadsheet to object stuff. There's lots of ways to approach that if you're going to do it manually. And there's, schema builders, another way that you can approach that. And, there's lots of different ways around that, but I think you need to determine if you want to go all in on the packaging tool and select the right one without knowing what you're going to run into, and like just what your bandwidth is really.
Well, and this is a great use case for starting with just a personal dev org. Because a dev org is a production org that's just very little data storage, but fully yours. So just get comfortable messing around with the dev org. And if you break it, okay, go spin up a new one. And then that way, you know, your cadence and process, and it's not going to solve the whole solution, but that'll help you get comfortable without breaking any part of your production or sandbox structure.
That's a great idea.
I like it.
That's
And
really
do
good.
a dev org. Don't do a trailhead playground, because those are largely like managed by Salesforce. So you're not going to be able to get as much information out. Do a straight dev org from developer.salesforce.com.
Okay.
So I have two other things I want to throw out there. So first, I love the idea of building it back from scratch, because it gives you a chance to evaluate your tech debt and make good decisions, be planful about that.
Yeah.
The other side of that, however, is once you build this like version 2, I assume you're going to push data from A to B then? You're going to replicate your data in the new version?
Yeah. I mean, I was just going to
Well,
extract and then try and.
Yeah. Your object references will not match in any way. You're going to have new object identifiers, which means all your lookups you'll have some challenges there. So like, if you've got a custom object reference that's A01 something, 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 it might not be A01 leader in the new thing if you build it from scratch. So add a data analysis piece where you have to do a conversion to make your lookups work to the scope of the build. You might have a better product when you're done, but it's going to be longer. Now, standard object references shouldn't be a problem, I wouldn't think.
But even then, if you've hard coded IDs, your record type IDs aren't going to be the same, and things like that. But
validation rules, flows, all that stuff. So yeah, it could get big fast. You might have really successful outcomes, but it's going to increase your scope.
You can chase it later. Yeah.
I obviously need to build out a timeline with the pieces. Well, and maybe I try a little bit of both, right? See.
But it's definitely a one bite at a time thing. So just, be okay with just taking small chunks, getting comfortable with that, because you're going to be doing a lot of repeatable processes. It's just changing what are you doing the thing to. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for all the feedback.
Let us know if there's anything we can help with offline, because it's a big thing. It's an easy thing. It's a big thing. It's not an easy thing. So you know where to find us.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. Chris was asking questions about these recent get ready for enhanced domains security notifications. Chris, do you want to, is there more to what you typed before we dive into it?
No. I just got that. I think everyone did email this week regarding it. Couple pieces I noticed mentioned talking about certain orgs that it was related to, like Hyperforce or
Edge network, right?
Yeah, and then it says all URLs will be affected. So I really didn't spend a lot of time in it, but I'm just curious to know if there's any. It says it looks like it's going to convert you anyway. Just trying to see if there's any gotchas that I should be aware of. And I think it doesn't happen for another year, but just curious to the group if anyone caught anything or was like, oh, wow, good, bad, or indifferent.
MFA snuck up on us in a year, right?
Yeah.
The one that is on our list as far as a tech data item to resolve this is we have a lot of report URLs with parameters built into links, and they're all written as salesforce.com versus mydomain.com. So we just have a long list of those and a couple action buttons we have to resolve. So those are the ones I can think of.
Okay.
But
Basically, if you can do a metadata scan of anything that looks like a URL, that'll tell you what needs to be fixed.
So this is Todd. We started out with a my domain from the beginning. So when we brought up the enhanced domains, we didn't see any issues. So luckily that was a good call by the consultants from the get-go.
Okay, thank you.
might be the first time ever the first two questions have been do a metadata scan and see what happens.
No, yikes. And nobody flinched or hung up. That's also surprising.
Right.
There's a pretty good write-up in the documentation, Chris, about like what to address. So that's where I would start too.
Did you put a link in your notes about metadata scan for those of us who don't have a clue what you're talking about?
I don't know if there is one, but like I can give you the short version of that. Any tool that extracts all of your metadata into XML will break it down into a file structure that you can then use a text editor to evaluate and look for things. So for example, we use it quite often when we're going to sunset a field, because what we want to do is we look at all of our reports and report types to see if a field is part of those things, so that we don't break someone's personal report when we take a field out of existence. There's lots of examples of that. I mean, you can look for a hard-coded URL, you can look for an ID in the metadata, because this big, long, quite frankly, terrifying document has everything that isn't data according to your org. We used to use Eclipse to do it really well. We use VS Code and SFDX a little bit. I would say that's not my first choice right now, because that changes the metadata file. I think the workbench extract gives you a pretty good picture, Dale. Is that right?
Yeah, and then the poor man's way of breaking it down is, I mean, no matter what tool you use, the XML files all become local on your computer, and you can do a basic Explorer or Mac Finder search on the term, and it'll pop up all of the metadata files where that reference is. And you can just go through each of those files, no different than a text file, or if you're doing Notepad++ or Word or whatever. But it's kind of the poor man way to do it. But Eclipse, yeah, was super awesome, because it would just list everything out with and it kept you in a nice clean container of your org. But yeah, and I'll add to Squire saying doing it through the XML search, because the "where is this used" button, it's great. It is definitely not fully robust. There's a lot of metadata that button does not scan.
Follow-up questions, Stuart? Did I leave anything out? Cool.
Stu, the teacher, was just keeping us on our toes, make sure.
Keeping us honest. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Okay, then was it Matt? We were talking about looking at a flow and got a good answer inside, but
yeah, I had posted a question about initiating a flow off of always start it when something record's created, and then also when a record is updated. And I think Christy put a pretty good solution in the chat.
I was under the impression that you could just say created or edited and not have criteria at all, and it would fire. Am I wrong?
Well, I want the flow to run always when a record's created, but not always when it's updated. Only when a certain field changes on the update.
Gotcha. All right.
So
because can you put is changed in the formula builder on a record triggered flow?
Yes.
Cool.
You just can't, it can't be a before, it has to be an after.
And not everything is part of the start criteria. So sometimes you have to be liberal in allowing it to start and then have a decision node right after that for when you really want it to run.
Well, that's what I did before, but then I felt like I was running it. So this is on the opportunity record, and the flow was starting every single time, no matter what. And I don't actually want it every single field has changed. So I was trying to limit it to just those times I needed it to run.
Yeah. And you kind of get a no-op situation there, Christy, right? Because you begin and then immediately end versus not even entering it. Right. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Sorry, is the question answered then? Or not? We still have a question? I'm behind. I'm always behind.
I feel like the answer that Christy put is great. I think it solves my question.
I would say just be mindful, just in case, that so triggers an order of execution. Told you we were gonna pull it up. The created date and last modified date are date time fields that go down to like the millisecond.
Yep.
And anything that might be happening in the order of execution could impact that thousandth of a second, that something may take a thousandth of a second to run through any of the steps in between lucky number 13 and, you know, after or then before or whatever, that what time
Yeah,
is
if
it?
you have a lot of flows, then one flow could do another flow or something. But has anyone yet played with the fact that you can now order the flows? Because I haven't done that yet, but I really want to.
Even then, like that may help, but even then, when you're saying compare those two date time fields, they are going down to the millisecond, so that if the last modified date is 1 millisecond later than the created date, they're no longer equal, just depending on what all else is going on.
Can we talk about the problem? Just some, go back to the, so the problem on the is you figured out the change. Are you still trying to figure out the create part?
If it's new.
If it's new,
Mhm.
you want to make sure that it's new when you're creating it.
So I want to run a flow that runs every time a record is created, an opportunity is created, and also when an opportunity is updated on a couple of different fields.
Okay. Here's what I was told, and I get to ask a question and get shot down again. I love this. What I was told is that, and then order of execution matters, is that you know that a record is brand new because it doesn't get an ID until it's saved. So if you can check, does this record have an ID inside the create flow? And the answer is no, it's brand new.
Isn't that
Well-
only if you're doing a before save flow and not an after save flow?
Well, don't do an after save flow then.
I
What's
just-
going on? Why are you doing that?
I don't know what
Okay.
he had set up.
So, okay, so I feel like we kind of glossed right over, like,
Okay,
if you have a record created or updated, it will always fire and created. You don't have to check anything. The entry conditions then say, in addition, if this is an update, check this criteria. So if you just see if the created or the close date has changed, that's all it takes to get this thing to run in both cases, right?
It didn't work that way. I initially started with just the close date is changed and it did not fire on a creation.
I agree
So if
with
you-
Matt. I've experienced that also. It does not always fire on a new when you have entry conditions.
I think it might need to be two different things. This might be two different beasts, unfortunately.
Yeah, see, I'm going to challenge back because it literally says in the entry conditions, if you do
Or-
record triggered flow, if you pick record created and updated, it says on a create flow, it does this. And then if there's updated, do this.
Yes, but
Oh.
I find, and this is just me assuming that, because of the is changed doesn't work when it's being created, it's brand new. It hasn't changed. It's like a brand new baby. Hey, there it is, got all the parts, but nothing's changed yet.
yeah, nothing existed to compare to prior to this.
Yeah,
And-
defining entry conditions for both scenarios is difficult.
Because at the end of the day, it's if it's created or if you've got a close date or if the close date has been changed, right?
Yeah,
Right.
in any creation and update where close date's
Got
changed.
it. All right.
So walk me through this here, since I'm, when are we triggering?
For an opportunity, any newly created opportunity and any opportunity where the close date changes.
Well, so before that though, so I'm doing record triggered flow, trigger the flow when,
Created or updated.
okay?
And right now, I don't have any entry conditions and I do what someone suggested and I use a decision tree outside of it. But I would like to do close date is changed equals true. And it, or, any condition is met, close date condition is changed equals true, or it's a new opportunity.
Okay, so close date is changed equals true, or oh yeah, okay, so that's not technically a field.
Yeah, no, that's why I suggested created date equals last modified date. 'Cause I've used that in a few. Make sure it runs early enough or in the right time. And I probably didn't do it here. I didn't do it here. I did it in a node right after here because not
Gotcha.
everything is available in Start.
Okay, fair enough.
Hmm.
Do I want that or no? It's been a minute since I've actually had to build a flow in the wild.
Hey, Matt, did you say you're trying to do this as a before save or after save flow?
After save.
Okay.
Where would I indicate that?
You just go to freeform and then drag it on the page like you used to do.
The auto layout drop down in the
Yeah.
middle.
I hate
Auto layout gives us some
Yeah.
trouble still. Yeah, we can't do
Gotcha.
certain things with auto layout.
Okay, so it's here that you're throwing your decision element?
Yeah, I do the decision right away.
Okay.
And that works. That's that. I mean, it's working as is, but if there's a way to do it using the entry criteria, even better.
So how in this are you able to determine if it's new? Like using it, are you able to get the standard is new? Or this is where you're having to put in created date equals last modified?
Well, that's what I normally do is create a date last modified is same, but I will tell you that Christina Chasko that I used to work with also would do a formula of is new equals true. How she set that I can't remember, which is why I default to the other one.
Right. Well, and then I mean, even order of execution and the reliability of formulas is kind of wonky in that. So, I mean, I guess, is there any opposition? I know we're getting into flow best practices and everything, but is there any opposition into just creating two wholly separate record triggered flows, one for on creation and one for on update?
I mean, with subflows, I guess that wouldn't be a bad thing. You could just have a very simple start to it and both of them call the same subflow so you don't have to maintain two different flows.
Right. Stu, I forgot my question. What were you shaking your head no to?
Is there any opposition to creating two flows on the
Gotcha.
same record? I don't have any opposition to that. I know
Because-
that I know that there is a lot of debate and there is opposition. So when I start to say that, then I've got a crowd of people with pitchforks. But to me, it's about the business need.
I mean, if you need, I guess I hear people when they say no, one per object and that's it. I'm like, but that's not practical because now that you have before and after, you may have a difference of created and updated. And honestly, just going through this, I mean, I'll call it a creative workaround. I'm not going to go so far as to call it a hack, but when created date equals last modified date, that's not what those were born to do. They gave us the is new function in validation rules to serve a purpose to evaluate, is this a new record? That's not available to leverage here, which my mind says, okay, what is out of the box to leverage? A record triggered flow when the record is created. You have that option. So I would definitely argue with the only one, strictly one per object, people to say, yeah, but it depends on when you need it to happen.
And just a heads up on that one piece. I was sitting in some Salesforce admin meetings earlier this week, and they did say that they actually no longer recommend that. And they recommend to do it by process instead of one per object.
And I think
Gotcha.
that's why they added the numerical order as well. They're like, yeah, keep it simple. Run this one first, run this one second.
Gotcha.
Yeah, they said that on
also
the
updated.
spring release call. Someone asked that question about one per object and they said, we're moving away from that.
Yeah, they've done a ton of work to make sure it optimizes and balances better. So yeah, I'm going to try to find it before this call's over. I have this really handy chart that kind of talks through the why, but it's not a default response anymore. I gotta be honest, I still feel like I would like to go all the way back to Matt, to yours, because the is created or updated is designed to do exactly what you're describing, but the on create isn't supposed to check for entry criteria. It's supposed to do work afterwards. And I'm really struggling with trying to find a use case for it because it's working for me. So I almost feel like I'd like to see your flow and feel like maybe there's something completely unrelated that's disconnected. You wouldn't have the ability to say created or updated if you weren't supposed to have them both built into the same flow.
Well, I mean, for example, you could have an entry criteria that says the amount, do this for flows where the amount is greater than $1 million. And you would know that criteria, whether it was created or updated, and then you would not run it on newly created opportunities under $1 million. So I think there's lots of use cases for using entry criteria, even for record creation. I don't know how that applies to the is changed specific, criteria, because that is a little different than just equals or greater than. But when I ran it like that, it did not work when I used the close date is changed as the criteria.
Yep. Did you have it set to all criteria are met?
That was the only criteria. And then my workaround was I did created or updated with no criteria and then do the decision out in the flow.
Sure. But your entry criteria was all conditions are met, or was any conditions are met?
It was all conditions are met, but there's only one condition.
Yeah. So that's why you're basically saying, yep. So let's roll this all the way back. So on create, you're telling it this field had to change. You have to have an or in that entry criteria to basically say, I'm either new or if I change this date. And that's why it was blocking you.
Yeah, it's like dividing by 0. You technically can't do it because there was nothing to change when creating on new.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Now, I'm not saying that there's still not more logic required to get this thing to outcome, but because you were saying this has to match, your entry criteria never was going to trigger. Because
I'll give it a try.
I'm sorry, I keep talking over you. I'm sorry.
I'll give it a try.
Report back, please. Let us know how it goes.
For sure.
I'm on myself right now, so there's so many in our org. I was just trying to find a quick one. So,
all right.
Who do we have up next, Squire?
Oh boy, who do we have?
You have Aaron, creating and refreshing a sandbox, possible to include an Apex class that will nullify the SSO configuration. Aaron, are you still with us?
Yeah, sorry. Did I post it in the wrong place?
No, you're good.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe it's Friday. It could have been my grocery list. So,
all good.
So we have this problem. We've been dancing around this problem for quite some time. We love SSO. We just set it up because of the MFA mandate. So our SSO actually goes through G Suite. 145. So of course, we refresh or create a sandbox and then submitting a case, let me in because we forgot to disable. So I was just, then you have to remember to enable. So curious if this is feasible.
So you should have to set up SSO specifically to handle your sandbox redirect.
Yeah, we have that enabled because of the G Suite. Okay. We have that enabled on the SSO where it says disable login with Salesforce credentials, because you have, a custom domain, you put in our domain, it'll take you right to the G Suite. So everything goes through the G Suite. I'm curious, what is that feature used for? Apex class. I've never known anyone that put in an Apex class on a refresh, and I thought, okay, it's there. Let's put it to work. But
I mean, I think exactly that. If you're trying not to have to mess with SSO and MFA, I mean, I think that's exactly. And I know I've seen it, but maybe going Mandela effect on this one. But I know I've had that with a client before. You just want to be able to put in your creds and get in, not worry about SSO.
Exactly. So just if there's a class that really all I need to do is nullify the disable login with Salesforce credentials on the single sign-on, because when I refreshed, I was able to connect with support, and it just by chance I happened to have a user that gave access to Salesforce for a year. So we just kind of randomly found this user, and it was a screen share. And what happened was on the My Domain, it kind of nullified the G Suite login, and we have login form on My Domain. Let me get it. Let me get this.
Well, so does anybody I'm as a consultant, I can't pull anything up. Does anybody have a production org that they're willing to try to spin up a sandbox refresh? Because I'm pretty sure there's a prompt in there that asks you, do you want to fire any Apex classes when the refresh is done?
Yeah, you actually pick it at the build step.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got a class, the class can trigger. So we use it to deactivate every user in our full sandbox except for our admins, and change all their emails because they always have that .invalid hanger on. So we have that. You can use that same Apex to write to metadata to make that sort of change. I guess what I'm wondering is I don't think you have to work that hard. By configuration, G Suite should be able to understand the redirecting URL and say, oh, I'm a sandbox, don't force SSO, because that's what we do. But we don't use G Suite, we use AD, but it's the same idea. It's an SSO configuration to say either use it or don't use it.
Yeah.
And that would make more sense, because now you'd have full control over who can and can't use SSO to get into any box.
But it's really that enablement of disabling Salesforce login credentials. That's what happened when I worked with Salesforce support, and they went in the back end through this user and unchecked that box. Then I was able to go in through like my Salesforce.
Sure.
And I went right in, but they had to uncheck that box first. My domain wasn't an issue.
Yeah, it's definitely not my domain. It's the domain of the sandbox, because it changes, right? Do you have an SI or SA login for your org that isn't connected to SSO?
I don't know.
And I asked that because one of the kind of hidden gems in the MFA documentation is a reminder that admins probably shouldn't be using SSO and should be using MFA to get in, so you don't get blocked like you're dealing with right now.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. The problem was, I know we were all notified, and I just got to this company 2 months ago, and it was like, hey, guess what? In 30 days, MFA is mandated. So we decided to do it quick, and it was the org wide. But you're absolutely right. Now we have to transfer it to profile.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, is this a full sandbox or just a dev sandbox?
No, it's a partial. We have partials and we have devs.
Got it. All right. I mean, the end result is that regardless, you're kind of stuck trying to get into this sandbox right now, right?
Now, well, I actually, like I said, I worked with Salesforce support, and I really wanted to see the default settings on, on this. And again, all they had to do was just disable the login with Salesforce credentials. So of course, now I wait until, late at night, I disable it, spin up the sandbox or refresh, whatever, and then, put a post-it saying, don't forget. So I just thought, the Apex class is there. It's a field. Why not?
Sure. I mean, if you feel comfortable in that space, you should be able to modify any metadata with an Apex class, deploy it to your production box, and then when you create the next sandbox, you reference that Apex class and it'll do exactly what you wanted to do. So, I mean, it works. And the nice thing about that Apex class is you can also write it so that it only works in a sandbox.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't accidentally break everything in the world if someone accidentally triggers it. But it seems like there's probably a better, like again, if you go to G Suite, or someone can go to G Suite and just say, oh yeah, we don't want to redirect here. If there's no SSO, then it'll take you back to a standard login screen, even if you've disabled the standard login, because the SSO is what overrides that.
Yeah, the issue is I'm not familiar with the G Suite, and I don't have access to it. So
yeah, totally get that. Been there too.
Yeah, and this is temporary because we're all, this is going from org wide to profiles.
Yeah.
Because as an admin, I need to get in immediately.
Is this a good way to prioritize that profile change so you can get that work done and then refresh, or do you just can't wait?
No, it has to be sequential, especially when you have 12 people with admin privileges.
Yep.
It's like, okay, we've all been there. We've all done that. So it's like, okay, we have to start weeding people off of admin rights. So it's not going to be a quick fix.
No, definitely not. Okay.
But all right, so as long as it's somewhat feasible.
Yeah, you can do a lot of things with that sandbox refresh Apex class. So it's definitely feasible.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Okay, I think we might be able to get through these last couple of questions, but we'll see. So Michelle, newly certified admin, congratulations. Feeling nervous about upcoming process builder retirement. We have most automation built in PB, and I'm just getting familiar with flows. Anyone have an awesome project plan for transitioning to flow you want to share? Right now, our plan is to leave most things alone in PB and only build new items in flow. Is that enough?
It's a good start.
Right. I mean, I guess just to clarify, because I mean, I have this question too. When they say they're retiring process builders and workflows, they're retiring, right?
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But what you have will still work.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Well, initially, right. I mean, hey, isn't that what Salesforce is about, right? Trust, it's not going to break. So I think, you just can't build any new ones is that's what I read.
Well, they're going away. They're not going to support them soon. There's no date, but you should be thinking about getting them out of the way.
Well, so hold on. Support and retiring, or not supporting and retiring, are two completely different things. So not supporting typically means if it breaks, we're no longer liable to help you.
Question on that. I've had some errors pop up on process builder processes I've built. And when I go to view the error, or when I go to view the process from the link, it takes me to more of a flow view of the process builder. So have they kind of behind the scenes shifted those in a way?
I would not be surprised. I don't know.
It was doing that before, because I mean, process builder is just flow in its deepest, darkest, like bottom of its base soul. It's flow.
Got it.
So when you click on it, it takes you there. Just like when you click, where is this used? If you have a field that's in a process builder, it'll take you to a flow version of the same process builder. So it's like Scooby-Doo. Process builder was flow the whole time.
I would have gotten away with it if your kids and your dog
meddling kids
found out that the gardener was just flow in disguise.
I mean, I hear you. It is, but it is, and it isn't.
It is, but it's not.
Yeah.
But
Which
does
is
anyone
not,
else,
Salesforce did not help themselves out with that at all with this transition, but
yeah, does anyone else find it interesting that they keep saying that classic is never going away, but process builder is going away in a year?
right.
Which I
Well,
don't think is real.
I think there's a significant difference between a full UI change and how you build your automation. I mean,
Yeah, because
there's
where's
no-
my dynamic pages for standard objects? Because I really want that UI.
Yeah,
change.
there's no user experience change to a workflow rule.
Right.
I think it more has to do, to me, with the size of the organizations that have a lot of process builder / workflow rules, et cetera, whether it's user interface or not. I think that people changing them, redoing them, that is a huge project. That is not happening in my lifetime. My opinion.
But that's why they gave you the converter, right? So it could.
Like that.
Marty's not going anywhere soon. So I disagree with Marty completely. She's staying around as long as they are.
I'm gonna say, no, I'm retiring definitely before that happens.
All right.
So I think going back to Michelle's original question, I mean, it's unfortunately an ambiguous answer. Definitely, yes, anything new, you really should be thinking about building in flow. That I think we probably could all agree on. It's maybe still questionable though of existing automations. Are they really truly going to go away? I would say a couple of resources to direct you to though in terms of learning flow is what is it, weekly now is Salesforce Automation Hour right after this one, or is it bi-weekly? And then Terry Miller out of Des Moines started a once a month call to actually similar to this, but focused 100% on flows because of this upcoming conversion. I think those are some great places to start for like a help net if or a safety net.
The Chicago WIT group is doing 2 sessions on like an intro to flow that Michelle Hansen is leading.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try and find it. I shared it on Twitter that I was going, so I'll post a link in the chat.
And the Pittsburgh combined groups, most of them are doing intro to flow like a 6-week, but it's more like once a month. So they're doing a lot. There's a lot of groups out there doing it.
Right. St. Louis, I think, is just wrapping up a 6-week one also that they've recorded. So I can look for the YouTube links on that. I know it feels like a little bit of a mountain to climb, but hopefully that at least is a starting point.
Yeah, the St. Louis one is the flow to the future, which was excellent if you're a new flow person. And on that site is the handouts too and recordings. Either one, I'd highly recommend them.
So these are great, thank you. In terms of project plan, I went through all of our workflows and trying to document what we're actually using, even if it's active. It might not be used. Process Builder, same thing. And so I've kind of documented what each of those nodes are doing. And so that was a very long and relatively helpful activity. But just kind of looking at that, I know that there's a new automation home feature that is kind of documenting the quantity of automations that are running. But just trying to get an idea, aside from just building new flows, new process builders in Flow, any like start here ideas, aside from kind of just documentation.
So
I mean, I'll be
Michelle,
honest, you probably have done so much more than a lot of other admins have in terms of just documenting. That's huge. Like that's an awesome first step. And then next it's evaluating everything. I mean, next it's evaluating everything to hopefully at least minimize the workload, but really it's roll up the sleeves, learn flow and do flow.
Michelle, I sent you my email to help because Dale helped me back in 2020. And I was new to Flow when the consultant at the time got cut off. And now I'm teaching a flow class at my current company, and I taught a flow class at my last company. So
Awesome.
reach out, because sometimes one-on-one help and just talking through it is so beneficial.
Awesome.
Yeah.
She helped me. She helped me, Michelle. Talk to Christy.
Thank you.
It's 2:00, friends.
So yes, it is 2:00. Brandon, let's see. Can we take 2 seconds on this? Cue me up for this question.
It's really easy. The BCC emails, that don't go into tasks. And we've got an executive that all they do is focus on, I need to see all the tasks, and they're not seeing emails, right? Because the emails go in to the separate server. Is there any hack, any workaround anybody's figured out other than like paying $20 a month to one of these services per user?
Yeah, pushing back and asking why an executive is asking for things at a task level.
Oh, believe me, that's a whole, because that's what they understand. They're not asking about pipeline. It's just a whole nother thing. So don't even get me started.
I've already had to use iMovie to edit a recording of office hours before. I really don't want to have to do it again.
I think it's 2:00, so we're gonna have to stop recording, Dale. Who's gonna push the button? Squire, Dale, me? Who's pushing the button? But
I
there's
will
that.
stop the recording, and then we can badmouth whoever we want.